Well, hello friends of the interwebs. My name is Clemens and today I want to show you how you can build a non-fungible token in Bitcoin. So a non-fungible token is just a digital representation of a physical asset. Physical asset could be almost anything. Think about, movie tickets, shipping containers, your college degree, many applications. And so today I'm going to build one example application that you can see here on my screen. It's an application for sort of collecting and trading artworks. So we have a little section here where you can sort of input data to create a new token. And then we can click this button here sort of to create a new artwork token. And what it does is it broadcasts a transaction to the blockchain that records that token. And then we have the section down here that periodically scans the blockchain for new tokens owned by this user. And so you just saw here that the woman in the green hat by Paul Cézanne just popped up on our screen. And sort of the other bit of functionality we have is that sort of multiple users can have different collections. So this is a different user here. And now if this user wants to send a picture to the other user, so what they do is they just click on that card there and says, please enter the public key of the new owner. So you pass in the public key of the guy over here. And what we'll see is that in a few seconds of time, the Madame Cézanne is going to disappear from the collection of the one user. It's going to reappear on the collection of the other user. So let's just give it a little bit of time. Here we go, it just popped up over here in this collection, and now it's going to be disappearing from here in a second. Okay, here you go. So this is our basic application. It allows you sort of to create a token over here. That's sort of like writing to the blockchain. We have the section down here that reads from the blockchain, checks the current state, and displays it. And we have this little gadget where you can sort of, send a token to another user, which is pretty much like updating the state. So in this video, I'm going to be building the entire application, but I'm not going to be starting completely from scratch. I'm going to be starting like from this application that we, built in our last video. So let's get going. So the first thing we want to do is create a smart contract. The smart contract is very simple. It's just a JavaScript file. We'll create a new file. It's going to represent an artwork. So we'll call it artwork.js. And the file just exports a class called artwork. And the class is the smart contract. So what's in a smart contract? The smart contract just specifies, in a piece of data through a constructor, and then legal ways for the data to be updated in the functions. So let's start in the constructor. So the data we want to store is the title of the image, the artist, and a URL to that image. And the body of the constructor couldn't be simpler, because all that we do is we just initialize the object to the parameters artist and this.url equal to URL. Okay, and so this is a perfectly fine smart contract. It allows you sort of to create these objects on the blockchain, but it currently specifies no legal way for the data to change. So since we want to allow this thing to be sent to another user, we add one function here called setOwner that allows you to, assign a new owner to this piece of art. So it takes one parameter, which is public key, and what it does is it sets a special keyword property called owners of the smart object to that new public key. And so the owner of a smart object is just, the guy who's completely in control over the state of that object. So in particular, he's the only person who can update, what's stored in that object by calling one of its functions. And it's very similar to owning Bitcoin. So in Bitcoin, you're the only one who can send the Bitcoin to someone else. And so in the Bitcoin computer, smart objects are the owners, the only one who can change, the state of that object. So that's our smart contract, just a constructor and a function. So let's start working on our application here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to upgrade this form that's currently a form for sending Bitcoins. We want to turn it into one for creating new artworks. So I'm going to do this here. It's going to auto-update on the right. So what do we need to do? So number one, we want to store, the form stores different data, right? This old form stores an amount and a to. So we have these two variables here, but now we want to store, the title of an image, an artist name, artist name, and a URL. And so we also need functions to set the title, to set the artist, and to set the URL. So if you're a little bit confused about what's going on up here, that has nothing to do with smart contracts. This is just, these hooks in React that you can use to, have state and functional components. If you don't know exactly what that means, just think of this as we're declaring a new variable title, initializing it to the empty string, and then we also have this function here called setTitle that allows us to set the title. Okay, so in the function that gets called when the submit button down here is clicked, in our wallet example, we'd be sending, the Bitcoin to someone else, but for now we just want to check if it worked. So we just console log, the title, the artist, and the URL. Okay, and so finally we have to fix our form down here. We don't want this to say amount, we want this to say the title. We want it to store the content of the title variable, and when the form is changed, we want to call the set title function. Okay, and similarly here, the next thing is going to be the artist. We're going to store the artist variable, this variable, and if the user types into the form, we want to call the set artist function. Now we have to do a tiny little bit of formatting. So I prepared a bit of new CSS so make things look a bit nicer. We do these things here. It's going to be a button. Instead of having a button that says send Bitcoin, we're going to have a button that says create artwork. And button. And we need our third input field for the URL. This displays the URL and updates the URL. Now let me just quickly grab my new CSS here. Copy app.css. Oops. So if we reload, hopefully it's going to look not horrible. Let's see what happens. Okay, this needs to be a string. Okay, that looks sort of better. So now if we click the create artwork button, what we're hoping to see is just a log of our three variables. So I'm going to set the variable title to T, the artist to A, the URL to U. And we're going to click the button and we hope to see TAU logged. That's cool. Okay, but now really when we hit the button, what we want to do is create a new artwork smart object. So if we wanted to create a normal artwork object just in our memory, we would just call the artwork constructor here, pass in the parameters. And luckily you can just copy and paste this here because we have declared these variables with these names here, title, artist, and URL. And now we can log the artwork. Okay, so artwork, we have to import the artwork class. Import artwork from artwork. Okay, so now if we hit the button, we'll get rid of the warnings in a second. Again, just a test. See if we connected everything together. And it logs this artwork that we just created here on our local memory. But now what we want to do is instead we want to create not an instance in our memory, but like on the Bitcoin blockchain. So to do that, what we type in is we call the computer new function, and we pass in the class as the first argument, and then just an array of parameters as the second argument. And that's all that needs to change to deploy a smart object to the blockchain. So to test if this works, so now I just don't want to post in dummy data, because we're going to writing it to the actual blockchain. I want to find an actual artwork and create it. So I go to one of my favorite websites here, WikiArt, and we'll have to find a nice artwork that we want to store to add to our collection. Madonna with a child, that looks good. So let's see here. Put this in by Giovanni Bellini. Okay, we have to find the image URL. So we're not storing the actual images on the blockchain, we're just storing the links to the images that are also on some server. So pass this in here, hit the create artwork button, and hopefully we'll see smart object logged. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is our smart object. So we just deployed smart contract to the blockchain. That was cool. So before we move on, I want to quickly get rid of those warnings down here. So this is what I talked about last time. UseEffect really doesn't want an async function to be passed in. So what they recommend to do is exactly what it says down here. We create a function fetch revs, which is an async function. And we're just going to do all our async stuff in here. And then we're just going to call that function revs. Okay, so that should get rid of the warning. Nope, unexpected token, line 14. Funds fetch rev as equal. Okay, that's not how it works. Here we go. Okay, cool. Warning disappeared. Things still load. That's good. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to, just like we checked for the balance before, we want to check for all the tokens that are currently owned by that specific public key. And so there's a static function in the computer called getOwnedRevs. Okay, and it expects a public key in its argument. And sort of what it does is, on input a public key, it returns an array of locations on the blockchain where sort of the smart objects for that public key are stored. And since we want to display our own artworks, we just pass in our own public key here. And then we want to store, this array of locations somewhere. So we'll create a new variable called revs, short for revisions, the function to set the revs. And then when we call this function, we have to wait on this guy. We just, store the result in the revs variable. And to see if it worked, we add another UseEffect block here to log the content of our state variable. Log revs. Okay, so now if all goes well, we'll see an array of locations on the blockchain that contains one entry containing, that token that we just created before. So let's give it a second. So first, okay, here we go. So it found an array, and the array contains one location on the blockchain. Okay, so it contains a transaction ID and a virtual index, which is similar to an output number. Talk about that another time. But now the user doesn't really want to just know where his objects are stored. He wants to know where, what the actual object is, right? And to do that, there is a function called computer.sync that inputs, a location exactly like this one here, and outputs, the smart object that's stored on this location. So it accepts, one of these revisions. What we have here is an array of revisions. So what we want to do is we want to map over the array of revisions. Oops. Okay, well, and we want to apply this computer.sync function .sync to every object in there, to every revision. But now there's a bit of a tiny complication. This is an async function here because it has to go to the blockchain and analyze it. We can't just map an async function of an array in JavaScript, but what we can do is we can write promise.all. And so this is actually pretty cool. What it's going to do is it's going to apply each of these sync functions to each element of the revs array in parallel, which is, a cool feature. We have to wait on this. And so now we just need a separate UseEffect block to, execute this code. Same shebang as before. Since there is an await in there, we have to wrap this in its own function. We'll just call this function set artworks. And close this function, call the fetch artworks function. Now, so This is again a purely React thing, but these use effect function accepts a second parameter, and what you have to do here is you have to pass in all the variables in your, or the free variables I suppose, in your function in there. And so what React is going to do is whenever this revs variable changes, it's going to execute this function, which is kind of cool because like sort of this block of code is going to look for, are there new tokens on the blockchain? Do I have any new locations? Which is very quickly. And when it finds a new location, it's going to do this computationally more intense thing to determine what the actual object is there. And so to check if that worked, we will also now log our artworks. And so we hope to, see an array with that artwork we just created at the beginning of the video. But artworks is not defined. Yes, I have to store. Okay, so several things. I need a new variable to store my artworks. Set artworks, and we have to store, this array of artworks in our artworks variable. So let's try again. Artworks is not defined. Why? 934. Okay, there's another typo here. Okay, that looks better. So now, if all went well, we'll see a log of the artworks. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is our array of locations, and this is our array of the actual object that we created. So that's pretty cool. So we created a new token on the blockchain, and we retrieved it back from the blockchain. So all that we need is a little, gadget to display it. So we'll create a function card.js, and also a file, card.css. It's just a React component that's going to display our artworks. So let's quickly add in the CSS here. I don't want to type out this code because it's rather boring. So our card is a functional component. It gets passed in, functional components are functions that accept props as parameters and return JSX or, pretty much HTML. And so what we do here is we're passing a smart object into the, React component just to, reinforce the point that, smart objects can work completely like normal JavaScript objects, right? You can pass them around wherever you want. And then all that it does is it returns some HTML that contains, the artist and the title and the URL. That works. So let's quickly display this on the home screen. So we add a new section here called something like your artworks. Your artworks. And it's going to contain a list, an unordered list. Is the class, I think it was called flex container, which is going to lay out these cards sort of in a nice, horizontal row. And for React not to complain, I have to also set a key. Just title is going to be okay for now. Okay, that's our unordered list. And now inside the unordered list, we want to have one element for every artwork. So we take our artworks array, and again we map a function. And the function is going to input an artwork and just going to return one of these card components that we just created. So we pass in the artwork smart object as a prop, and I think that might be it, or not. Yeah, no. So this key actually needs to be this key needs to be on the element. So whenever you have like this list of things, then React wants a unique key for every element. So let's just save this and see what happens. Card. Okay, we have to import the card. It's fine. Import card from card. Okay. That looks better. So hopefully now we'll see the artworks displayed down there. Nope, artworks.map is not a function. Artworks.map. Okay, so yeah, we have to initialize these things to empty arrays. Otherwise, React is going to try to apply the map function to an empty string because I just initialized it to an empty string and then it complains. Here we go. So now, once it's loaded, hopefully, here we go. So this is the the token that we created all the way at the beginning of the video, and so now we've just read this back from the blockchain and displayed this to the user. That's pretty cool. So now, next what we need is we want to build this little gadget where we can send this artwork to a friend. So let's start doing this real quick. So what we want is when in the artwork, when someone clicks on the card, okay, we want to execute the function handle click, click, click. Okay, so let's quickly define the handle click function. Click. That's a function. And whoopsie. And then this function is going to ask the user prompt to input a new public key. So it's going to say, please enter the public key of the new owner. Okay, and now this prompt is going to return a public key. Public key. Okay, and for now, just again to check that it works, we'll just console log the public key. Public key. Oops. Okay, save. Here we go. Please enter the public key of the new owner, blah, blah, blah. And so now we should see a log of this little string that I just typed in here. Here we go. Okay, that worked. So instead, though, what we want to do is we want to change the state of the artwork. We have the artwork right here, artwork. And all we want to do is we want to call this, set owner function to, assign a new owner to the thing. All we need to do here is call the function on the smart object, and again, calling functions on a smart object is it works just the same as calling the function on any calling function on any object. Yeah, so and then we just log something like send artwork to public key. Okay. So now, number one, it asks us for a public key. We don't have a public key, so let's quickly get a public key here. Displaying the public key of the user is very easy. It works the same way as displaying the address. We can just copy and paste this here. So currently we're just displaying the address and the balance here. We'll just add another line to display the public key. And so we just call the get public key function here. So now we have our public key here, and the second problem is we don't have a friend. So this always defaults. The way it works here is when we're initializing our computer variable, we're always initializing it to this fixed identity, sort of that's associated with this mnemonic string here. So we need some button to sort of create a new user, and that's also really actually cool and simple. So all that we do here is under all of our wallet section, we add a button. Oops. Okay, and has an onClick function. Click. And so what this function does is it just creates a new computer instance from random. Okay, and sort of assigns it to this variable here. So now we want to assign this, so we need a set computer function. So what it does is it, okay, this is probably going to throw an error, that's fine. So on click, all that we do is we set the computer variable and we just set it to a new Bitcoin computer instance. Okay, so if you don't pass anything into the parentheses here, then it will just sort of generate a new Bitcoin computer instance from random. And so that's how we can go about creating separate user. Okay, so just to make this look a little bit less horrible, okay, we have to call this a type submit. Submit. And we want to have a new line here. Okay, so now we have a create new user button. So if we click the button, what we're expecting to happen is, the address to change, public key to change, balance is going to go to 0, and all the artworks are going to disappear. We just click that, and again, always takes a couple of seconds. These things could be much faster. Balance goes to 0, and the artwork is going to disappear. Here we go. Okay, so that's how we create a new user, but every time we reload the page, we go back to sort of initializing the application from this fixed user, so we haven't lost that, our old user quite yet. And so now there's one problem that, like, currently the application doesn't automatically reload. And so if we, send, a piece of art to a different user here, then we would need to reload the page to display the artwork. But when we reload the page, it's going to, go back to the default one, and we can never go back to this public key. So one simple way to fix this is just to have this work like every other Bitcoin app as well. And what Bitcoin, your Bitcoin wallet does is it just periodically, queries the blockchain for example, what your balance is. So for example here, and so, just in an infinite loop that gets called every couple of seconds. So we'll just do this exact same thing here. And so one way to do this with these React hooks is, so pretty much what we want to do is we want to trigger this code to be executed again. And remember that, whenever a variable that we pass in here changes, this code gets executed. So we'll just create a new variable, refresh, that we will sort of automatically change every couple of seconds. Refresh, set refresh, and we'll initialize it to 0. And then what we just do in here now is, sort of we run this code, when the page is loaded, and then after 3.5 seconds, set timeout is going to execute a function after a couple of seconds. Let's say after 3.5 seconds, we just execute the function that just calls set refresh and just increments the value by 1. Okay, so this is just this little trick where we can, execute this piece of code every 3.5 seconds. So if we save this, now we'll see that it's going to be logging, the revisions and the smart objects every 3.5 seconds. And so that's why when I showed you the demo in the beginning, the pictures would automatically appear on the screen. Okay, so now this is just going to keep checking. Okay, here we go, every couple of seconds. So now, this could work. Make this a little bit bigger for dramatic effect. So this is our original user. This is our new user. So actually we'll create a new user right now. Okay, balance goes to 0. He has a different different address, different public key, and no artworks. So we grab this guy's public key and click this button. And so we enter our friend's public key, hit the enter, and we're hoping the artwork to disappear from here to reappear over here. So it only checks every 3.5 seconds, and then my computer is severely slowed down by the recording software, but here we go. Okay, so what we just did is we built a little application where you can sort of create tokens, you can read tokens from the blockchain and display their state, and you can call a function to, for example, send them to another user. And so this looks like a very little toy application, but if you think of it, many different tokens work exactly this way, right? So it's a good starting point for a token project. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you want to get a notification for my next video, please hit the subscribe button, and I will be back with more soon. Thank you very much.